that a no?
That's a no. Alright, about to collect this question. So we can get started with today. It is just one question. I realized I was spending a little too long on the bell ringers, so trying to cut it down to 1 to 2 questions each day. Alright, so let's make sure we understand this, especially for those of us who were gone on Friday. You need to pay attention to this. Or if we were asleep on Friday, we need to pay attention to this. What? I don't know. No one in this class would ever sleep in class, right, Caroline? Exactly. Alright, so what do we mean by selection bias in the context of the average word length activity from Friday? Please notice there is the definition of selection bias, but then there's also like in the context, and we always want to pay attention to what that context is. So because elements of the population were consistently missed. Is that selection bias?
No.
What is that?
Bias. Confinement bias.
Have any of us gone back over our vocabulary that we've learned from this unit? Huh?
That is selection bias.
I didn't say it wasn't. I asked if it was.
Yeah.
Y'all following the lead.
So what is the difference between selection bias and just bias in general?
Selection bias picks out it having a focus on a certain group.
Okay, so with selection bias, you are literally missing a whole chunk of, again, elements of the population, right? You're missing a group of things. What were we missing? So I will say, we went ahead and put X's up here for when we randomly did it. But when we look at these dots up here, the original points, what were we consistently missing? What was the selection? Why did we get such large averages?
Because we randomly chose words.
We picked the big words, right? Which meant that we consistently missed the smaller words, right? And so that is an element or a set of elements of the population that were consistently missed. So how is that different than just pure bias in general?
Because when you try to do just big word, then you bias, you just bias.
So this is important.
Bias, you not randomly selecting stuff?
So when you don't randomly select stuff, typically you're going to get samples that are not representative of the population, right? When we do selection bias, we're going to consistently miss whole sections of the population, but what that ends up meaning is that our samples are not representative of the population. We'll go into more detail about that today. But the whole idea is if you have a biased sample, then or if your samples are biased, then those samples are not representative of the population, right?
Yeah.
Selection bias is a specific case of that where you're only selecting a certain group of the population and you're ignoring a big portion of it, right? We missed a lot of the small words when we did that randomly selecting or randomly selecting, right? So the elements of the population consistently missed. But I want y'all to notice, is anybody here talking about this in terms of the context?
You got some kids that know.
I'm tired. Don't be laughing at me.
Did we make some mistakes? Get back on time?
No, we got to talk about a whole lot of red lights. There was an accident on 69. I'm tired.
It sounds like I made some mistakes not getting that class on time. Tristan, did you put your phone up?
Yeah.
Okay, I just missed it. Did y'all check in with the office?
Yes, sir.
Okay, do you have your pass?
She didn't give us a pass. She just told us to check in.
Okay.
It's on paper, though. They can see it.
Okay. All right, so what I want us to notice is one of the questions or one of the points I was trying to make is in the context of the word length, average word length activity. So it's not just, hey, the elements of the population were consistently missed. We talked about it multiple times now. Which elements were we missing when we did our selection process?
Smaller word.
We were missing the small words, right? we consistently did not select the small words, which is why we were biased in our selection process. Does that make sense?
Right.
We good with that? Okay. Don't just give me definitions. How does the definition work in this context? Because you're not going to be asked to just reproduce a definition for my test. You're not going to be able to be asked to just reproduce a formula for my test. You're going to be asked to apply those things in the context of the setting. That's what matters, is the ability to apply them. Okay? I did see, so someone did say people were choosing the longest word, and that's an issue, right? And so why was the selection bias an issue? Well, because our samples, were they representative of the population?
No.
No, right? And what's the whole goal of an observational study?
Yeah, no bad. Try to decrease.
Reduce it, and you do want to reduce bias, but that's not the goal of an observational study. This is another thing, you got to know these terms. If I ask you the goal of an observational study, this has not changed, is to take a sample and to make a prediction about the population. If we took our samples here, would this have given us an accurate view of the population?
No.
No.
We just randomly chose some.
Well,
We only chose, well, that's the one, oh, we chose random words, but we still kept choosing big words.
but not, I mean, in the X's, and we'll talk about it in a second. My point is here, the majority of these points are way above the average, correct?
Yeah.
You gotta get to class. That's 10 minutes. Okay? So, we consistently missed the mean there, right? Most of the words are above it, and I do want us to notice, and we're going to talk more about this. I know some people are talking about, hey, we still have too big of words. Yes, but when you look at these X's, are the majority of them above the true average? I mean, kind of, but I mean, like, that's pretty darn close. If you think about the fact that you're averaging 5 words, right?
Yeah.
You either get 3.8 or 4. You can't quite get in between. I would consider these almost perfect. Not quite, but almost perfect. When you think about it like that, it's not like the vast majority of averages were above. It's pretty scattered around and pretty darn close to that true average. Okay? Here, when we did not have the random selection, those words or those averages were consistently above the population average. Okay? That is bias. We are consistently getting values that do not accurately represent the population. I would have a very incorrect understanding of the population average if I looked at these samples as a whole. This is a pretty accurate representation of the population as a whole. If you want to be able to make a prediction, you have to have a non-biased sample. Okay? Do y'all have any questions for me before we get started with the rest of today? About bias, observational studies, any of that stuff? Alright. You do need to go ahead and have your calculator ready to go. You need to have the 3.2 out. And I would even go ahead and get your textbook out, volume 2, because we'll use both of those pretty soon today. No, you do not need that right now.
3.
So, we're going to wrap up the 3.2, what is the average word length. Alright, we talked through some of those details already with the bell ringer. This big ideas thing, we're not going to have time to do it in class, we're super far behind. I'm going to leave this as a homework assignment that is going to be due a week from today. So I'll pass it out, but this big ideas right here, I'll explain it more later, but it's due a week from today. Okay? Hopefully we'll get to Stats Medic 3.5. What?
I thought we missed the 2 days.
Last
That was
week.
last week, dude. Today's Monday. Alright. So, we are still working on this idea of explaining why bias is a serious issue for observational studies and can prevent one from completing the goals of the study. And we're trying to identify examples of bias in study design so that we can reduce the effects of bias. Alright? So, you should have a new document on your calculator right now. Okay, go ahead and look at it. A couple of things I want to do. First off, I want y'all to take just a couple minutes, and it shouldn't take long. Create a dot plot, just like we did on Friday. I want you to get the practice in of creating a dot plot. You need to create 2 dot plots, actually. One is for the average word length when you did it on your own, just picked 5 words. And then one for the RAWL, the random average word length, okay? So I want 2 dot plots on your calculator, one for the average word length, one for the random average word length. If you were gone or have questions, talk to your group members. I'll be coming around trying to help you as much as possible. Brandon, since we're missing so many people today, Brandon, jump up here and work with this group, okay? Just because we're missing so many people. Huh? So you gotta add a page. What type of page? Not graph. That graph is for like functions and things. We're dealing with what?
What is a dot plot?
We're dealing with data and statistics. Yep. Hit escape first. Get out of that. That's not it. It doesn't have the variables in there. What do you need to do now that you have the page open? No. Look around the graph. So what did they say earlier we needed? We're dealing with, there you go. We're dealing with data and statistics, okay? The word do not. Kyron, you're not done yet. What do you mean? You don't have a dot plot? No. For what variable?
Another button.
That's not it. That's closer. That's where that is. What it? Talk about it. So we have 2 separate ones. You need to make sure they understand how to. There you go. That's not done. Well, come on. Stop talking. There you go. That's good. Now make another one for the random. What? Not necessarily. You just did it in the same thing. So actually hit Control. We'll undo it. Do it again. And again. There you go. So hit Control and dot to add a separate page. So remember, you just need another page. How'd you get that page? There you go. Add another page. Looks like what we have up there in the dots. Right? You just need, you don't put that. But that's not what you want. What is the other variable? But it's not. But what was the variable that we're dealing with? Start there. You have the wrong variable. We need random average. You already had average. Oh.
I told you to keep them here like that. I was just trying to make it right.
That's the wrong way.
Okay, enjoy your good years. We have all 3, or our 2 extra graphs. Okay? What's up? We need control. What are we dealing with? Data and statistics. Like, it sounds like Maven was literally telling us to okay, so control dot data and statistics. It's not, we don't have the dot plot yet, but that's what we'll do out there. Why do you have this page? You need this. Oh wait, that's the first one. Did you sign into your calculator?
Yeah, we got our.
You need to sign in.
Yeah, I don't see what's wrong with that.
Okay, both of them?
Wait, what you gotta make that up
Because there was the average word length and there was the random average word length.
I can't make up mine.
What do you need to add?
It's like, it's come out like,
What does it say at the bottom?
Definitely.
Well, you need to click on click to add variable.
yeah, and I need this.
Yeah, then you can add your variable.
No,
I'm talking
dude,
because
you
I
have
we gotta do it. I split it. When I went back to the, I went to the top. Came back.
Allow, see, wait, so
I'm trying to have like a little, I don't know. I have
So I made civil, I made my.
I
need two truths, hold on.
That was.
Yeah, I know, but they'll both see.
That was it, he laughed with that.
Well, but you haven't made it.
So over there, I'm trying to.
I thought it was 2 lines in the Control dot.
You create this kind of line. Thank you. Alright, couple of quick things I want to point out. Because most of us are getting there, okay? But I need to make sure that we are clear on this. Data and statistics. Please notice there are options to put how many variables? 2, okay? That is for scatter plots and bivariate data. Is the average word length in any way related to the random average word length?
No.
No, right? Those are 2 completely separate sets of data, so don't put them together. Just go along the x-axis, and where it says click to add variable. And we have our average word length. And it just automatically makes it for you. You can make other graphs as well, all right? But that's all we want for now. And then I want another data and statistics page, and I want the random average word length. Okay, we all good on that? Okay.
Wait.
Yeah, you already have it, dude.
Oh,
Alright, 2 quick things though, alright? We are going to have a second part of math literacy associated with these 2 dot plots. I will email it out. Make sure that you email me if you're not getting those emails, okay? And I will work with you to not penalize you since you haven't been getting the emails, but you need to communicate with me. So I'll email these graphs out along with a few questions. If you need me to print stuff out so that you can see it, let me know ahead of time. So I'll print it out for you this afternoon or tomorrow so that you can have it, and we'll work it out again like that. But my printer's running out of ink and I have to go buy some. That's the reason why I haven't printed this stuff out. Here's the thing. Oh, here's what I want to say. We've already talked about it just looking at this dot plot up here. When you picked your 5 words, the majority of those points were above the population mean, correct? Okay. When we randomly selected, we were pretty scattered, but pretty darn close to the population mean, correct? Okay. But how close were we with the random, and how far away were we when it was not random? Do we know that answer yet? No. What could be a measure to tell me if our mean was close to the true mean? Or if these means were close to the true mean? I've used the word multiple times within that question. What is a measure that I could use to see how close these means are to the true mean? Could I calculate the mean of all those means? Yeah. Do you want to do that by hand?
No.
No, because that's like 16, or it's at least 12, I know for sure. So let's learn how to use calculators, all right? Go back to 1.1, okay? And let's learn how to use these calculators to calculate the mean for us. You just don't need both those variables. You only need one. So what you can do is you can go to actions. There's a way to get rid of the move.
We supposed to have that on?
And then when you're on this page,
Alright, come on, let's continue the game. What do you call it?
and then when you're on this page, you need to click a menu and then do a separate page for the other variables that you don't have now. Alright, sorry.
Oh, we gotta calculate it? We gotta do this?
So,
How you gonna say?
what?
Oh, yours is at the bottom, okay. That's
Yeah, I just haven't scrolled up. So, here's what we want to do. We want to calculate the average of all these data sets. What am I going to press first?
Calculate.
Good.
Oh, we press, equal.
So we usually hit Control in order to add a new page. You can hit equals, but there is one other button that the majority of mathematical operations can be accessed through.
Control and capture.
Multiplication.
How about hit Menu?
Oh.
There you go.
Oh, well.
You see how Menu gives a whole bunch of options for what you can do? Okay.
You get 5 hours.
So, well, and when it's a calculator page, you get a lot more. When it's a graph page, you get a lot more. But the menu button is what's going to give you the majority of the operations. Where do you think I'm going to go once I hit menu?
Insert.
Action.
Not insert. Data would be a good option, or say it again.
Statistics.
Or statistics, right? So let's look at data quickly. Under data, where do you think I might be able to go?
Yield.
It's on your page.
List also.
I want to click.
Quick for out.
Okay.
Rank.
Oh, really quickly, yeah, that's a good question. If you ever get to a point where, hey, I don't want this anymore, you can literally just hit the arrow to the left to go back, or just hit escape. If you just hit escape, it'll close out and you just go back through whatever you need to, okay?
I feel so. I could probably turn my calculator on.
Yeah, I wish y'all would tell me that. Alright, so list math. Does anyone see what we're trying to calculate there?
Yeah.
What is it?
Is it random?
Mean.
Mean, right? Don't click it yet, okay? So, yes, within data, you can look at different mathematical operations. It gives you the chance to do a mean. However, you would have to do that just once, or you'd have to do mean, and then if you ever want any of the other things, you have to do those separately. The statistics operation is much more powerful. So go back, go to statistics, okay? The statistics will give you lots and lots of options all at once. Stat calculations, exactly. We want to calculate some statistics.
Would it be 5, Miss Kim?
No, not 5.
Me, the move.
One variable, two variables.
So typically we do 2. Listen to me very clearly on this, y'all.
Oh, got two variables.
Alright? Right, we usually do 2 variable statistics and we have 2 variables that are related to each other. Okay, but we only have 1 variable at a time. So go ahead and click 1 variable statistics.
Are you kidding me right now?
Are you trying to follow along on the calculator?
Log
I
in.
don't, I'd have to log in under student.
Log in.
Oh, okay. So, 1 variable statistics.
What did you do?
I didn't.
Oh, it's because you were clicked into this equals there. You can't be clicked into that. Now go through it. See, now you have it option. Alright, so once you get to 1 variable statistics, only do 1 list at a time. So always leave it as a 1. You can do multiple things at once, but just leave it as a 1. So X list, alright? X list is the variable that you want to deal with. Yes, ma'am. Did you go to menu? Did you go to statistics? Did you go to stat calculations? Okay? Hit enter. Okay. Hey, I need all eyes up here and I need you paying attention. I'm going to go through it one more time. Okay? We're going to go to menu. We're dealing with statistics. Actually, get rid of that. We're going to statistics. Stat calculations, and under, we're going to 1 variable statistics, okay? The number of lists that I'm going to ask you to do at a time is 1. There's a way to do multiple at a time, but it is easier to just do 1. What variable are we trying to calculate statistics for?
AWL.
AWL. Click on the arrow next to X1. You see how it gives you the variables that are possible? So you should have been paying attention when I was going over all this kind of. See, I marked those. See, okay. Alright, so make sure it's AWL. Make sure that your first result column is in C, because A column is AWL and B column is R, AWL. By the way, that's average word length and random average word length, okay? So once you have all that in there, just hit OK.
Wait, hold on, I gotta change my B to C.
Okay.
C, change it to C.
Alright.
First result column should be C, because B has your random average word length.
So just C.
So just C. Okay? Notice that it gives you a bunch of statistics, is what they're called right here. If you don't have that 5.31 right now, you need to let me know. But I also need you paying attention as I go through all this.
Okay, I see.
You just need a C there.
Just put a C right there.
Put a C, and then you have to hit. Hey, really quickly, if you delete the B and you put C, you have to make sure there are the square brackets at the bottom before you hit enter. It's supposed to hit enter.
You heard me?
No,
I use square bracket.
it's, you see, look at the parentheses and look at gray.
You gotta put the C in the brackets.
We've been doing this too
I
many
know
times.
that. Thank you.
You gotta
Alright.
put C in the brackets.
No, it has to be C and then square brackets after the C. Okay? So, I want you to notice all of the statistics that are calculated for you. Most of this you will not need right now, but we will get to a point when we will use most of this. So it's easier to go ahead and just learn how to calculate these things. What is this right here? X bar. What is that?
We told them me.
That's the mean. Okay? Anytime we use X bar, like that, that's known as the sample mean. There's a different symbol when it is the population mean. Okay? But that is our sample mean. What was the average word length within that song?
2.9.
3.9 letters per word. That's what we want to recognize. There's context to it. It's not just 3.9. That's 3.9 letters per word. What is the average in all of our samples that we did when we just picked? Huh? Ignore it. Focus right here. Okay? What was the average? 5.31 what?
2.
What?
Letters.
Letters per word. Right? You got to remember what these things are coming from. Right? You took stuff like 5 letters plus 3 letters plus, I'm making these up, and you divided it by 5. Didn't you? But those were all letters, so that's 8, 12, 15, 18. Notice that's 18 letters per 5 words. There's a context here that we need to acknowledge. What's that come out to be? 3.6 letters per word. Alright? So when we see this 5.3 here, that's 5.3 letters per word. That's not terribly far off, but is that close to what the average, the true average was? I mean, it wasn't, as I said, it's not terribly far off, but it's not super close. Alright? Well, another thing I want you to look at is this right here. I know there's a lot of things going on, okay, but there's one more that's actually important. This SX right there is known as the standard deviation. Okay? You don't need to know this for the test, but I just want you to be aware. What this is talking about, a standard is a typical or average amount. A deviation is just how far away it is, in this case from the mean. So a typical amount that each word was in length from the mean of 5.3 was 1.1 letters, right? So what we see is that even though this was our mean, we had a pretty decent standard deviation of typically each word was about 1.1 letters either longer or shorter than that. Let's go back through this again though and look at it when it's random. So calculate all of that for the random average word length. Where does everything start from? Yep.
Let me hear, AU.
Mm-hmm.
We don't do this, yes, that calculation, one variable,
RAWL, right? Because we're doing the random average word length.
So what we changed the E to?
Notice it should, what are you talking about? Yeah, it should be E, because D is where we ended the previous one, so the next set of data can start in E. So the first result column should be E. Yes, because we're doing random average word length.
so the X1 is supposed to say B?
No, what variable are you supposed to be looking at? Random average word length.
And what frequency is supposed to say?
Say again?
What the frequency is supposed to say?
Always one for us.
So
Yeah.
you ain't gonna give me my.
It look like it, right?
You seen our, all you had, all you said was say, oh,
Click on the arrow.
What if I would have told you to read that?
yes.
Oh,
Trying to do the random average.
With the who?
Give my.
So, we want to go through this again. Okay, so go through menu. What are we going to go to now? Okay, so click on 4. Oh, that's fine. Yep. And then you're trying to do stack calculations. And you want the one variable statistics. So hit enter. And just leave it as 1 as all time. So hit enter. It's going to be easier, just hit enter. And then if you just click leave, it'll give you the so you want. Yep. And then you're good. I'll just hit OK now. Okay. All right. Who did? Yes. Okay. That is a good question. All right. Maybe ask, are we going to have to do this on the test? Yes. Okay. It should be straightforward. I can easily collect the data where you have shown me that you have created the graph, that you have done the calculations. And so, yes, you'll have to do this on the test, which is way easier than having to do all this by hand.
Wait, who is it?
You will still have to, so hear me on this, okay? I will need you to explain to me what these numbers mean. I also need you to put your money
I'm bored.
away.
I ain't got nothing else to do. I'm tired of listening.
Put your money away.
I'm kind of noise.
Okay. So I want you to notice, is this average closer than this average? Yeah, what was the average word length for real?
3.92.
3.92. What is this average word length?
4.something.
It's just 4.0. That's it. So when we randomly selected, did we reduce the bias?
No.
Oh, wait.
No, we did.
First off, we reduced the bias. We can just see it up here. Remember, when you chose, the majority of the words, or the averages, were just above the true average. Right? That is bias. When we randomly select, you see how it's pretty scattered right around the true average? Or the population average. Right? It's right around what it's supposed to be. That is reducing the bias. And also, is the sample mean close to the population average?
Yeah. No, yes, yes.